to talk a little bit about our fleet program offers and also what we're seeing on the horizon in terms of fleet electrification opportunities and where this market is going. A bit of background in my role. So started at BC Hydro in 2019, specifically to work on fleet electrification programs. Spent a lot of time developing a program offer with customer engagement and consultation that led us to launch our first fleet electrification program offer about a year ago, actually, June 2022. And also in my role as a key account manager, I work with a large number of the EV infrastructure customers in BC as well that deploy their own networks like Tesla, like Electrify Canada, Parkland, Chevron, Shell, all of the larger players that help supplement the fast charging network in the province too. So I'm going to go over a little bit of fleet electrification trends, what we're seeing in the market, specifically what I learned at the Advanced Clean Transportation Expo and Conference that was about a month ago that I had the good fortune of attending. And then I'll talk about our fleet program offer, mostly to help provide some customer context in what we're seeing from that space and where customers are going and which segments are looking promising in BC. And then I thought just for a quick overview, I'd talk about our fleet electrification rates. We do have specific demand relief rates for fleet electrification projects. And so those can be pretty attractive for some customers that have that level of charging and demand on their utility rate. So yeah, a bit of background. Like I mentioned, I was able to go to the Advanced Clean Transportation Expo and Conference. It was the first time I was there. It was in the beginning of May in Anaheim. And you know, here in BC, we're not the same market as California. We're lagging behind in terms of deployment here with respect to commercial zero emission vehicle trucks. You know, California is definitely the leader in that space. And so, you know, we are seeing some uptake here in the market growth as well. But it was quite eye-opening going to this conference and expo. The entire Anaheim Convention Center was full of zero-emission vehicle trucking technologies and vehicles. You know, football fields full of them. And so it was really a great feeling to go to this conference and to see how much movement we're seeing in the commercial vehicle space as well. You know, given what we're seeing in the passenger vehicle growth in BC. Really, I could say pretty much every major truck manufacturer is investing heavily in zero-emission vehicle technologies. If they're focused on battery electric vehicles, some of them are also doing hydrogen fuel cell. By and large, we saw a lot of BEV though. That seems to be the primary focus, and I'll get into that in the next slide a little bit as well. So everybody, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Freightliner, Daimler is part of Freightliner. Lion Electric there, the Canadian company, you know, a whole bunch of other players. And we're seeing a lot of other interesting new startups in this space as well. And in some cases, those new startups are partnerships with existing large OEMs like Daimler and Freightliner, who have now a side partner called Rizon that's looking at a Class 6 box truck configuration for market deployment. Some of the key things out of the conference were definitely battery technology was a big part of the discussion, very much advancing rapidly, huge amount of focus on improving kilowatt hours per density, you know, the efficiencies of battery technology. As you know, one of the utilities in there, one of the overarching themes, if I'm going to be completely honest, was infrastructure projects are now becoming the barrier. So a year ago, you know, it was really about vehicle availability, you know, having the challenges to get those vehicles. Production quantities were pretty limited. Market deployments were pretty limited. A lot of the manufacturers were just getting their production cycles up and running. That has now shifted in California and some parts of the major markets in the US to really being about infrastructure readiness. And so, you know, we did have a utility only session on one of the breakfast conferences, and we all sort of reminisced about how we were getting beaten up quite a bit, but it is becoming the big key component moving forward is getting that infrastructure ready for charging. Really interesting policy drivers in the US. So they have the Inflation Reductions Act that helps move targets forward. Most recently, they have an unfortunate acronym ACT again, but there's ACT and ACF, which is Advanced Clean Fleets Rule. Which now actually mandates not only vehicle manufacturers with zero emission vehicle sales targets, but also fleet operators. And if any of you have looked at what's happening with our government right now, there is a consultation paper going out with the same sort of strategies for discussion, right? Do we start to influence not only vehicle sales, but the operation of trucks in the province as well? Commercial truck charging hubs. So, a year or so ago, if anybody's familiar with Portland Electric Island, that was a partnership with Portland General Electric and Daimler Freightliner, who happens to be, right there in Portland as their main manufacturing and head office site. They built a modular truck charging hub, probably one of the first ones in the U.S. I think it was the first one in the U.S. And they did a lot of test beds there. It's quite an interesting site. Now there's lots of private entities now entering this space. So there's companies called like Watt EV that are now putting together full-scale commercial truck charging hubs, in some of the key states in the U.S. There's another partnership with Daimler and a few others called Green Lane Technologies that's doing the same thing. So we're seeing that happen in the US. Where we are here in BC is we're part of the consortiums that are looking at that on the West Coast corridors. We are working with some of those teams. We do have really good relationships with some of the manufacturers to have those conversations, but we're not quite there yet, right? We do need to do a lot more planning and strategy to figure out where commercial truck charging hub makes sense and what that technology looks like in terms of charging configuration and power levels. Oops. So the next thing I'd mention is shortly after I came back, I think this was sometime in early June or maybe late May, the ICCT, I think that's the International Council for Clean Transportation, published a report on the potential for battery electric commercial truck zero emission vehicle technologies and the market growth. Some pretty interesting findings out there. They are seeing that they're going to start to see really attractive total cost of ownership in some of the key driving states by 2030. And then they expect to see 1.1 million zero emission vehicle trucks and buses deployed in the US by that target date. Another really interesting comment, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, obviously I'm not an expert, but they don't think hydrogen fuel cells in the commercial trucking sector are going to be a big player. They feel that this whole segment will be largely dominated by battery electric, simply because of the plans for growth on infrastructure and the improvements in battery technology and efficiencies. So we'll see where that goes. Definitely some of the key areas, and this is something that we're definitely considering in our space too, some of the freight zones. So ports, industrial zones, freight corridors. We do have a really good working relationships with Vancouver Fraser Port Authority and Prince Rupert Port Authority and those types of customers. And so looking at those types of opportunities and supporting electrification in those corridors. And the other thing I'll mention is the maximizing use of existing grid capacity is key. This really strikes home with us at BC Hydro. So how can we potentially avoid having to bring in new service and new power? Can we help customers shape their load? Can we influence, different strategies for time of use and charging in off-peak hours to try to maximize the grid capacity without having to bring in, additional capacity? And so that was a key theme of the report as well. And some of these utility opportunities that were identified in the conference, but things that we've been really speaking to our customers about as well is really important for early engagement. The better we are prepared to have conversations with customers, the earlier we can see what that horizon looks like, the better we can help them with their design connection applications, the better, our team and Mike's team can better inform our planning group to look at where we're going to see some hotspots for load growth. So these are all key things that we keep communicating with customers. Again, I said maximizing existing capacity, looking at potentially phased infrastructure projects. Can we help customers get going in their fleet electrification projects early by helping to shape their load and find ways to, manage their charging, and then parallel maybe building a bigger deployment as they start to phase in their fleet electrification projects. Definitely a key theme is a high level of preliminary support for utilities and advisory services. And I'm kind of pleased to say that we've done a fairly good job of that with our program offer, which I'll just get into in the next couple of slides. Improved design processes and efficiencies are definitely a key thing that we need to consider in our electrification plan. And then, other technologies are kind of coming up and bubbling to the surface now. So vehicle to grid, and, what do those opportunities look like? And then where do we fit with truck charging hubs, and which partners are the right ones to help move forward with those types of deployments? So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly, but I thought it would be a good context to talk about our fleet electrification program. Like I said, it's just a year old now. And we originally launched this program to support customers with the conversion of medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles to battery electric. I will say, in recent weeks, we've actually decided to open up that a little bit. So we're really trying to be less restrictive in terms of the type of fleet vehicle. We're open to light duty all the way through to heavy duty. We are seeing most of the support, though, required through the medium and heavy duty, simply because the costs are bigger and the infrastructure projects tend to be bigger. And so, I did have a slide here about our eligibility, but we're really tuning that down. Basically, we're really open to working with any type of fleet, with any type of customer segment, and just trying to help move them forward on their fleet projects. So there's 3 funding offers. One's an EV ready fleet plan. This is really effectively a fleet electrification roadmap. We fund up to $15,000 of consulting costs to do that study. And then the second one is what really customers told us was the biggest barrier to fleet electrification projects, and that's the hard cost of putting in new electrical infrastructure to support their fleet chargers. So we have an infrastructure funding incentive that we provide against those costs. And then the third one is basically pilot projects. That's a nice way to say it. Technology assessment funding, but it's really a pilot projects, any sort of early stage opportunity that customers looking at. So I'll just go over those 3 offers a little bit more detail. The fleet plan, I'm pretty pleased to say that I think this is really helpful for customers. If you're thinking about a fleet operator that's got to run their business every day and is dealing with all the types of logistics and things that they have to manage, and resources and operators and everything else, what we heard from customers is that I don't have the time to figure this stuff out. I really need help from the utility. And so our program is designed for them to go find a consultant, and we have pretty good consultants in this space that are doing this, to run through their existing fleet inventory and look at all the annual data, and then figure out which of those vehicles could potentially be electrified based on their duty cycles, based on their use case and applications, and when that could happen. So the consultant will work with the customer to get all that key data. And then once they've determined which vehicles they could potentially electrify in their fleet, they can go derive a charging plan. Now I know, how many chargers I need at what facility, what power level they need to be to support those vehicles, duty cycles on a daily basis, and what that looks like from an overall charging plan. And then our roadmap, or our EV ready fleet plan, then asks for the consultant to do a capacity assessment. So what does that mean in terms of my existing electrical service? Do I need an upgrade or not? And what are the costs associated with that? And so for the most part, I think a lot of our customers have been quite pleased with this whole process. It really does give them all the visibility on what makes sense to electrify in their fleet. It gives them the total cost of ownership. It does all the financials for them. And then they have a higher degree of confidence of what they could potentially electrify in their fleet. Like I said, we do fund up to a maximum of $15,000 for fleets that are over 150 vehicles. 50% of the study consults the cost up to a maximum of $15,000. And then for smaller fleets, we do a maximum of $10,000. I will say we're probably going to look at removing those thresholds and maybe just landing on one sort of funding amount, but we'll see where we go. The next offer, like I mentioned, this was the key barrier that customers identified. This is the cost of infrastructure. There's a pretty simple way to explain this funding program. We're going to help fund up to 50% of electrical infrastructure costs, including if a customer needs new BC Hydro connection services. For everything required to bring in that electrical service, design work, conduit, civil work, whatever it is, all the associated conductor and hardware, for everything but the charger. So we're not here to provide rebates against fleet EV chargers. There's other programs in the province that do that. So we're really here trying to offset the costs of that electrical system upgrade. Customers have 2 paths to go to this funding. Ideally, they're completing an EV ready fleet plan because then we have all the costing. They know what their charging plan looks like. But if the customer is well educated in this space, they've come up with a plan already. They know their fleet numbers very well. they can advance directly to this infrastructure funding application and do that directly as well. Pilot projects, pretty simple. Any type of customer identified opportunity for short-term temporary testing. Really, we're very open book about this. We're entertaining any kind of idea that a customer wants to advance. So one of the ones we had a while ago was a truck operator had an opportunity to borrow a pre-production unit in collaboration with the vehicle manufacturer. They ran that truck back and forth on a known route to test it out. We helped fund a temporary charger at a location to do that testing. And then everything buttoned up and went away. So the truck manufacturer got really valuable performance data, so did we, in terms of the charging and what that looks like. And then the operator themselves got some familiarity with the technology and how is the user experience. So pretty valuable exercise. So that's just one example, but lots of opportunities for pilot projects. We're open to anything that a customer would suggest. So a couple of project examples here. I can't necessarily name names yet, until we get moving forward. But here's some good representative customers. So the first is Fraser Valley, large trucking operator. I think they've got well upwards of 300 trucks in their fleet. They are non-CAM, so that means they're not key account managed. They're a customer that was introduced to me directly. Not typically a BC Hydro key account customer because they didn't really have a big electrical footprint. But guess what? Now they're looking at electrifying a substantial portion of their fleet. So, it makes sense for us to really work intimately with them. They do everything from regional, local delivery haul to longer haul transportation corridors. And they really were focusing on what they could do for some of the shorter haul stuff that they operate out of the Fraser Valley operation. So basically they have some routes that they call city routes. They run back and forth to, let's say, Delta or Burnaby, back to their depot, and they do that all day long, right? So the short distances, multiple travel routes during the day, maybe a daily dues cycle of 300 to 400 kilometers. And then a really nice opportunity here to do overnight charging for those trucks. They worked with us to do an EV ready fleet plan. And that was really successful exercise with their consultant. And now we've provided them with an infrastructure incentive offer against the cost to put in potentially a phase plan for 20 Class 8 battery electric tractor trailer trucks. They saw really great payback on that city fleet. If you factor in things like low carbon fuel credits and the economics of fuel, they saw a good payback, well in the 4 to 5 year period. On some of those fleet routes. So that's really attractive. We haven't moved forward yet. We're still working through the finer details. So hopefully that project gets launched in short order. But we're really hopeful that it's going to be a really flagship project for our program. The next is a large retail key account. So they are a key account managed customer. They have a depot in Delta that does customer deliveries. They're working with Lion Electric. So that's the Class 6 box truck for deliveries of retail products. And they came to us, said, we don't need a study. We know what we need. We've done all the, logistics already. We do this stuff every day. And they worked with the vehicle manufacturer to provide an incentive offer application direct to our infrastructure incentive. And so right now they're going to be looking at 6 Class Box 6 trucks out of their depot in Delta. With a potential, future expansion to 12, and they have actually signed the infrastructure incentive agreement. So that's good news. We do have a project moving forward with them, and when time comes, we can hopefully share a bit more details on that. I won't spend too much time on this. Just to say, you can see here that across diversity of our fleet customers that we're working with, it's open to everybody. We do have a lot of local governments simply because they've got climate policies and goals that they're trying to strive towards. And so lots of them have done really good studies and are starting to move forward with fleet electrification. Transportation logistics customers like that one in Fraser Valley I mentioned. Lots of school districts. School buses are, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, school buses are everywhere now. So we're seeing a lot of school districts move forward with fleet electrification projects. And then a nice mix of industrial customers, post-secondary education institutions, airports, retail, ports, and it's growing from there. Typical fleet sizes are in the, A76 to 90 light duty. I think we're seeing anywhere from a fleet size of 5 or 2 all the way up to a few thousand. So a pretty broad range of fleet. Infrastructure costs, so across the board, we're seeing pretty high infrastructure costs, $422,000 on average for charging at a facility depot for new electrical service. And based on the incentives we calculated so far, we're averaging about 180,000 per incentive. But they go for anywhere from a low 5 figures up to the 6-figure amounts. And then the last thing I'll talk about just quickly is our fleet electrification rates. So as a commercial entity under our medium general service or our large general service rates, customers have to pay a monthly demand fee, right? So on their peak power usage based on a 15-minute interval, customers on their utility bills will pay a certain amount per kilowatt of their peak power usage or peak power demand on a monthly basis. I don't know if that $12.70 a kilowatt is still current. It might be higher than that. But you can see that, in the existing opportunities for fleet electrification projects, if you're sitting there charging a large bank of fleet vehicles overnight, those demand charges can be pretty heavy at $12.78 a kilowatt. And so our teams designed 2 rates to help relieve those demand charges for fleet operators. The first is an overnight rate. So between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., customers can opt into that rate and not pay any demand charge associated with fleet charging during that time frame. There is a slightly higher energy rate associated with this optional rate, but we do run calculations for customers, and it's pretty attractive in what they can save from demand charges. And the second one is a demand transition rate, same type of idea, but there's no demand charges at all throughout the entire operating day. This rate does, though, diminish over time. So fiscal 27, which I guess is our 2026, you can see here that the demand charges start to ramp back up to their normal state. At the same time, the energy rate kind of ramps back down to its normal state. And this rate will eventually go away. It's more meant to help customers with an opportunity to figure out how to manage their charging and balance everything so that they can look at the opportunities to avoid those demand charges when they're in full deployment. The overnight rate, though, however, has no shelf life. As far as I know, this is going to be persistent. We don't see any reason to change that. We've seen a number of customers start to really move forward to access that rate as well.